All right, welcome to today's TSC Lunch and Learn. I am joined here by Truck Safety Coalition Board President Dawn King. Thanks for being with us today, Dawn. Dawn, you are muted. Yep. Let's see if I can unmute you.
All better.
Very good. Well, while we await our very special guest today, Dawn, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be involved with the Truck Safety Coalition?
All right. Well, I've been a volunteer with the Truck Safety Coalition since 2005. We found out about them after my dad was killed late in the year of 2004. He was killed by a sleepy semi-driver who had driven all night shortly before Christmas in order to deposit a load of electronics to be sold for Christmas. So my dad was stopped in traffic and he was hit from behind and killed instantly. So that's why I work with Truck Safety Coalition today.
Well, thank you for being willing to share that. I see our very special guest has joined us. And Dawn, why don't you take the floor as a constituent in the neighboring district to Congressman Andy Levin and introduce our special guest.
Hi, so I'm a Michigander from District 8, which is just up the road from Congressman Andy Levin's District 9. And as such, I have the privilege of introducing him to all of you this morning. He's a union organizer, a human rights activist, a workforce policy expert, and a green energy entrepreneur. Congressman Levin spent his career fighting for an equitable and inclusive future for all people. He's been advocating for working families since the 1980s when he organized hundreds of healthcare workers for the Service Employees International Union. Andy has worked in Washington, D.C. as a staff attorney in the Secretary's Office of the U.S. Department of Labor and worked with unions and employers on legislation critical for workers' rights, including the National Labor Relations Act, the proposed TEAM Act, the Federal Transit Act, and the Fair Labor Standards Act. The Congressman most recently introduced H.R. 7517, the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act. Welcome, Congressman Levin. We are so appreciative of you being with us today.
Thank you so much, Dawn, and thanks, Zach. Dawn, where do you live exactly?
Davisburg.
Fantastic.
So
Okay.
I'm currently with Representative Slotkin.
Fantastic. It's my good friend, and it's nice to meet you. And I'm glad to be here. Very glad. Zach, would you like me to? What's our plan here?
Well, sure. We've got some prepared questions we'll work through, but we're not going to be, if you will, beholden to the script per se. Let's have a great, authentic conversation on this exciting legislation. But I do have to point out that we are all native Michiganders here.
Where are you from?
From Heartland, Michigan.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Yeah. So we are particularly thrilled to have you with us. As I like to say, Michiganders are the best folks around. So this is a great group. But for those of us not from Michigan, maybe not familiar with you or kind of the record of service in your family, maybe you could just share a little bit by way of introduction about kind of what led you into a life of public service.
Well, I guess you're referring to members of my family. My family's been devoted to public service for generations. The federal courthouse in Detroit is the Theodore Levin Courthouse. That's named after my great uncle Ted Theodore Levin, who was the chief judge of the Eastern District of Michigan, appointed by Harry Truman, President Truman.
Wow.
And his nephews, my dad Sandy Levin and my uncle Carl Levin, each served 36 years in Congress, my dad in the House and my uncle in the Senate. They overlapped for 32 of those 36 years, Zach. So they're by far the longest serving siblings in the history of our United States Congress. And together they even served more years than the three Kennedy brothers. So I'm just a little person trying to fill some big shoes, I guess. I don't know.
That is truly remarkable. And then, as Dawn noted, your career from the earliest stages has consistently seen this emphasis on workforce and labor needs. And this bill, the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act, is no exception. So, why is that? And have you found that it's a message and a need that resonates across both sides of the aisle?
Yeah, well, that's right. And I've devoted my life to workers, working people, working families, their rights. They're just that they should have a good living, that they should have health care, that they should have a pension, and that they should have unions if they darn well please too. But really, truckers, whether they're owner operators or, they work as an employee of a company, whatever their situation, they really face brutal working conditions, and they have inadequate pay. They have long hours, and truck drivers make our country run. I mean, everybody's talking about supply chain problems. There's no supply chain without truckers moving all these goods everywhere. And they're not the only thing. We have ships, we have rail, but they are absolutely central. And treating truckers better would make the world more safe and would help with these supply chain problems we have. And it's just incredible that truck drivers don't receive overtime pay for overtime hours. This is this exemption that was made many decades ago. The idea was, I guess, way back then, we don't want them to work long hours, so don't make them eligible for overtime pay. Well, of course, what that led to is just, an industry exploiting them by making them work long hours without getting overtime. And that has contributed to this extremely high turnover rate that hurts the trucking industry, because truckers can't keep up with the thankless demands of their work. And so this bill, the Got Truckers Act, just simply says that truck drivers deserve fair pay for hours worked, and they deserve safe conditions. And I think when truck labor rates are fair, there's less incidents of driver fatigue, fewer regulatory violations, a reduction in crash rates. And so it's going to prevent a lot of these tragedies that happen when truckers are forced to work way too long. And so I'm just saying, let's fix this problem by repealing the motor carrier exemption of this Fair Labor Standards Act at long last. And that's all the Got Truckers Act does. It's one of these simple things. And as you alluded to, Zach, it does have bipartisan support. My, lead sponsor on this is a Republican colleague from New Jersey. And I think the more we're able to talk about this with colleagues, the more Republican and Democratic support it'll pick up, because it's just common sense. It's better for everybody.
It is. And we use that term a lot, and hopefully we don't overuse it. But there's a lot of common sense things that don't get done, Congressman Levin. So we are very pleased. And just to hear what you said, I mean, we've submitted statements, testimony, formal comment, op-eds, really hammering home all the points you just made, for a variety of reasons in different kind of media venues. And it is difficult to get traction. So we think that this is a powerful way to try to kind of force the attention on the issue. And you mentioned some of the anticipated safety benefits. To add on just one more, statistically, one is more likely to be in a crash in their first year driving as a professional driver relative to other years. And so when we talk about this retention issue with our largest carriers, losing 90% of their workforce year over year, you're asking for trouble. You're literally asking for trouble when we simply could. I mean, the bill itself, it's as short as they come, right? Amend the Fair Labor Standards Act, eliminate this portion, and that's it. There's no fluff. There's nothing else going on there. No kind of cup game happening in what you're doing. And we appreciate the simplicity of the solution. And so you mentioned kind of the benefits to drivers, the benefits to the public. What else would you say has surprised you when you when did you first get introduced to the nature of this issue, and what surprised you as you learned more about it?
Well, I think I'm the only member of the House who keeps a labor law fellow on my staff. We raise the money outside to do that, but because I'm the union organizer in the Congress, the labor lawyer in the Congress, and I just focus on these policy areas. And Mary Grace Menner, my labor law fellow, I believe, raised this issue with me. And I said, oh, I forgot about that. I mean, Zach, I'm 61 years old. So way back when Bill Clinton was president, I worked in the labor department. When Robert Reich was Secretary of Labor, I worked in his office, and I was in charge of defending certain aspects of the Fair Labor Standards Act. So way back in the recesses of my brain, I knew about the motor carrier exemption, but I hadn't thought about it in decades. And I said, wow, this is nuts. We have this pandemic. Who would have thunk it, right? And it's caused these supply chain shocks around the world. People are saying we don't have enough truck drivers. And there's some very simple thing we could do to improve the situation, because people can stay if they can afford it, if they can make a living, right? That works. And B, you give the companies an incentive to hire more drivers if they're paying a lot of overtime and they don't want to. So the drivers are either going to have a more sane lifestyle. They can see their kids, they can see their families, maybe they can coach little league or, sing in the church choir or whatever people want to do. And B, if they're working long hours, they're going to make the good money that they deserve. And so they'll stay around. And I didn't know that much like you and Dawn know about this safety issue about trucks. This has been a huge learning experience for me. And just, you talk about common sense. Your point about that so many drivers leave, the turnover is so high, and a disproportionate number of accidents happen with first-year truckers. Well, make the industry more livable, more sustainable for drivers. You're going to cut accidents significantly, save lives.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. We couldn't agree more. And we saw this across, I think, a number of different sectors, but when workers were deemed essential and others not, maybe had more flexibility, it's insult on top of injury to be essential and not be eligible for overtime, particularly during that time during the pandemic. Those were tough times. A lot of restaurants were closed, turnpikes were closed, truck parking that might normally already scarce be accessible is closed, and those are just very difficult conditions. And I'm sure you haven't had time to check it out, but about a month and a half ago, we had another session like this with Dr. Michael Belzer. You may have run across some of his work. He's another Michigander, again,
Okay.
best folks coming out of Michigan, over at Wayne State, former truck driver, former Teamster as well, tank driver, I believe. But his message in short for us, his takeaway was, we need to pay safe rates. We need to be willing to pay drivers what they deserve to kind of normalize the market in the first place. And if we say there's no consequence to wasting a truck driver's time, you can bet it's going to continue to be wasted. That was kind of his big takeaway for us. So, we are certainly pro trucker. We think this will certainly improve those working conditions, as well as the fact that, on average, I'd have to find the citation here, but you'd have to work roughly 70 hours worth of time for 40 hours worth of pay for the average driver, which is kind of insane. Something we wouldn't wish, I think, upon any of our loved ones. That's for sure. So as you've kind of socialized this, I'm curious, what feedback have you received? Does you serve on the Committee of Health and Labor? Do they have interest in holding a committee? Has the Biden administration reached out? What's the feedback from Capitol Hill, so to speak?
Well, I've been mostly when you introduce bills. Washington is just like overrun with lobbyists, and people trying to protect moneyed interests and stuff. So I expect there's always pushback, but this thing seems to have legs. I mean, I'm kind of encouraged about it. But first, I do want to say something about the point you were making, because you really brought back memories for me. So during the pandemic, right? Whoever, we never had something like this in 100 years in our country. So none of us have lived through it, right? So this pandemic happens, everything shuts down, and I'm a member of Congress. I still have to go to Washington. So I and some of my colleagues who are at least not the hugest distance, I started driving. I didn't, and I drove back and forth by myself, staying isolated to protect my family. And, my dad's 90. I've got 2 sons with Crohn's disease, Crohn's disease. That means they have to take medications that cause them to be immunocompromised and stuff. Anyway, the reason I mention this is, Detroit to DC is like 8 hours or whatever on these interstates. The truckers are out there. They have to be out there. I mean, people aren't going to have milk. People aren't going to have gas at their gas station. People, everything we depend on. And I really remember thinking like, the farm workers in the fields and the grocery store workers, and so many people are essential workers, but boy, are truck drivers essential workers, and they had to be out there. So you really reminded me of that. But I tell you, Zach, of the legislation I've introduced, I really feel like this is one piece that it's so hard to move legislation. But a lot of and part of it is just the vast amount of it and trying to get attention to it. And unless you've been there 30 years, you don't, necessarily have the clout to say, hey, my bill has to move forward. But this thing doesn't, the owner operators are for it. The Teamsters are for it. The safety groups are for it. And I haven't, run into a lot of opposition yet. So I want to I'm going to really try to build this up so that we can actually move this legislation. I'm pretty excited about the project of it.
Oh,
It's
excellent.
tough to get
We're
through.
excited
Yeah,
to support you
thank
any
you.
way we
But
can.
we'll need it.
What so in terms of what you see perhaps happening in the future, do you think there's potential for the Committee of Health and Labor to want to schedule hearings on the topic? Is it not even that far yet? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's not that far yet, but we've been on a district work period, really 3 of the last 4 weeks. And then last week, so I had COVID actually. So I was in isolation. I couldn't travel to DC when we were in session last week. So when I get back there, I'm really going to have some conversations about it, and see if we can't move it, because I don't think it'll have the level of support like with virtually no opposition. In that case, there's a way to move bills without even taking a recorded vote. I doubt it's, I'm sure there'd be somebody come out of the woodwork more to oppose it, but it does seem to have real broad appeal.
Yeah.
Really broad appeal. So I'm going to really push with committee leadership to see if we can move it, move it forward.
Sounds good. And I'm sure you may have seen as well, or at least your staff saw, that in the supply chain report that was recently released, kind of co-released by Transportation, Department of Transportation and Department of Labor, one of the recommendations was the need to urge Congress to do just this, to eliminate motor carrier exemption of the FLSA. Has anyone out of those, administration departments kind of reached out to coordinate, say anything in response? Because I believe this was introduced timeline wise. I'm not saying it's why you did it, following that report being dropped.
Yeah, no, that report did influence us, and we said, oh, wow, okay, this makes a lot of sense. And the report was, again, a very practical effort to say, how can we deal with these problems from the pandemic? How can we deal with these supply chain issues, with the related labor market issues and all that? And so, my staff is definitely talking to staff in the administration. And, I'm really hopeful that we can, we can try to move this forward together. with them.
As you say, it was a very pragmatic report, and I think sometimes what's lost is we focus on the needs. I think justifiably so, for safety and for truck drivers. This is also a recommendation made to promote efficiency and productivity. So I mean, there's wins really all around. I think it would be difficult to stand on the opposing side of this issue. So what can interested citizens, organizations like ours, who care about this issue, who care about safety, want to see less crashes? For those who may not be aware, we're seeing roughly 5,000 crash fatalities every year on our roads. And despite the fact that we had less traffic volume during COVID, we still roughly matched the pre-COVID figures, which is frightening. What can normal folks do to help educate the public and support you in trying to raise more awareness about this important issue?
Well, they definitely, everyone can reach out to your representative and your senators. I mean, every American has one representative in the House of Representatives and two senators, because each of us live in a state, and each state has two senators. So I really recommend that that everybody who's seeing this, who's hearing it, reach out. And if the Truck Safety Coalition has, information for people, and you can share, because it's always great to be armed with information. And I just encourage people, to reach out to your congressperson and your senators, say, hey, I heard about HR 7517, the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act. And even if you have that information, to use your own way of saying it, whether you're emailing, calling, writing an old-fashioned letter, it's all good. If you can see your congressperson in person, that's even better. Make an appointment. You'd be surprised. You can get an appointment, look at their schedule, catch them at the Memorial Day parade in your town.
Yeah.
Really, they're walking down the parade, go out and shake their hand and say, hey, I'm a truck driver, or hey, this happened to someone in my family, whatever the situation is. And you got to support the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act. Zach, I get a report I have my weekly report. First thing I look at is, what are constituents saying? And I get it, like how many letters, how many calls. It's in like graph form. The issues are laid out for me. I feel as a member of Congress, it really matters. So if members are starting to see this, they're going to get on board. And Jeff Van Drew and he on the Republican side and I on the Democratic side, will work this to add support, add co-sponsors and so forth. So it really, people, please don't get cynical about this.
Right.
We whatever, even if a person is a far left, far right, in the middle, doesn't matter. The vast majority of members of Congress sincerely want to do a good job of representing their constituents. And so when the constituents speak, it really matters.
Now, that's an important point in this age of kind of cynicism and anti-institution and anti-government. To hear someone say that, I do think certainly goes a long way. And the opportunity, I mean, yes, if you're in DC, you can try to get a visit here, but folks, go home. You got July recess coming up for almost everyone, and that's a couple months away. In the meantime, you can reach out by phone, email, call, what have you, to raise the topic. But do you find you tend to have more flexibility and availability to meet with constituents at home? Is that pretty open for you?
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's if you're a good member of Congress, it's very busy. But for example, this morning, just before I got here to meet with you all, I spent time at a federally qualified health center, called Honor. And oh my gosh, I met with so many doctors and mental health professionals and counselors and social workers, and I spend my days here meeting with constituents. Also, I'll tell you one thing I do is every week I have my staff give me some of the people who've written and called and, whatever, just several every week for me to call back if people made an impassioned plea, or they were a lot of, high school students, or
Yeah.
just a wide range, seniors who are having trouble. And I personally call them. So this thing about contact with constituents is really important. I'm sure different members do a better and worse job of it, but they all think they do a good, or they all want to do a good job.
Sure. So I'm guessing one of the asks should be to ask your representative, your House rep, that is, until there's a Senate companion bill to sponsor this bill.
Absolutely.
I remember when it was introduced, the list, but who's, in addition to your lead, your Republican co-lead, who do we have signed on as a sponsor?
We really haven't started campaigning for co-sponsors yet, but we have several from all around the country. Hank Johnson from Georgia, Eleanor Holmes Norton from DC, Mondaire Jones from New York, Mark Pocan from Wisconsin, Dina Titus from Nevada, and of course, Jeff Van Drew and Rashida Tlaib from Michigan. So I haven't even, we haven't even started doing a big campaign for co-sponsorship, but that's absolutely right. Have your congressperson co-sponsor this bill. Say that's what you want. You want them to join the co-sponsors of this bill. And I really encourage folks who have a Republican rep to really encourage them to get on the bill. I'm going to make a big push to keep it bipartisan. There's so much yelling at each other and stuff in Washington and in state capitals about, a lot of that is about this, culture war, whatever. People get all upset about these issues. This is just a practical economic issue that's about people being able to make a decent living, and about saving lives by preventing crashes from people who may be forced to work too many hours to try to make ends meet.
Yeah.
So it's about safety, and it's about making trucking be a profession that can support a family in a sane way. And therefore, it's also even about battling inflation and keeping prices down by having, enough truckers to get goods to market, and dealing, with some of these supply chain problems.
Hey, it's well said. Well, that's the list that I had. We asked some questions that came in during the event. Don, did you have anything in addition for Congressman Levin today?
No, I just think it's really important that we, excuse me, get everyone out there to contact their congressperson, because that's such a simple ask. It's not confusing. It's not something you have to study and you're worried they're going to ask you questions on. It's a simple thing. And if we can get 3, 4, 5 people for each congressman calling in, wouldn't that be something?
That'd be amazing. And let's assume you never did it before. Don't be intimidated. You can go online and say, who's my congressperson? And they'll just ask you to type your zip code. That may be all you have to do, and it'll show you their number. But people, I give out my number to anybody. I mean, my office in Michigan is 586-498-7122. That's the phone number. That's all you have. You call that number, and you could just leave a message for me, and I will get it, and the staff will respond. Now, of course, people call who need help, and that's really great. And I want to encourage anybody who's a veteran or having problems with the post office or the immigration system or Social Security. You should always call your congressperson. But we are here to hear our constituents' viewpoints and to act on that. And so do what Dawn tells you. Make that call, send that email, whatever it is. Go on the website. You just go on your congressperson's website and give
email
that way. Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody out there that thinks people should work for free, which is what these drivers are doing. So we've all, had hard jobs in our lives when maybe we didn't think we got paid what we should have gotten paid. But if we're a normal employee, once we hit that 40 hours, we probably got overtime. So I think all of us can easily support this bill.
Well said, Don. Well said. I can't think of a better way to close our time together. Congressman Levin, did you have anything else you wanted to share that you didn't have a chance to get across to our listeners today?
No, Zach, I just so appreciate you all. And but one of the best parts of leading this effort has been meeting new friends and allies like you all and the Truck Safety Coalition. I've been really gratified to see that there are folks out there, often because of tragic events in their own families or their own friends, trying to make the world a safer place. And this is just bone common sense to end this the motor carrier exemption, to keep people safe, to make trucking viable, a job for people so they can stick around and do the work, and to deal with our supply chain problems. So please reach out to your congressperson and your senator, because the way a Senate bill gets passed is a bunch of senators hear about a House bill and they're all like, hey, I'm going to introduce the Senate companion. So people should call their senators for sure, because then they'll be knocking down my door to say, hey, I'm the one who's going to do the Senate bill. So
That's right. That's right. Hey, well said. We know your time is scarce. We appreciate that you spent it with us this afternoon, and I know we'll be in touch.
thank you. Thanks, Dawn. Thanks, Zach. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.